Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this event today. I would like to say thank you for everyone joining us here in the room, but also, of course, also to those of us joining online. There's the camera, I believe. I'm delighted to have such a, I would say, global audience with us, not only here in the room, but also obviously everyone joining us online from all over the world. My name is Michael Siegner, and I'm the resident representative of the Hans Seidel Foundation in Vietnam. And I am very much delighted that this Accelerator Sessions on the sides of the World Circular Economy Forum 2023 is happening today. And before we start with the hopefully inspiring discussions of this event, I would also say a round of thanks to everyone who's joining us today, but also, of course, to those that made it possible to have this event here. And first thanks goes to Isponre, our long-standing partner, and DG Nguyen Dinh Tho, who will share Vietnam's experience with us today. And of course, I would also like to thank our friends and colleagues from Circular Innovation Lab and from Chatham House to make this actually happen and to support us in this event. And of course, I would like to say thanks to Citra for hosting us in this beautiful building and making this event possible. And of course, for sharing Finland's experience as well. I don't want to forget that. As time is limited, I would like to keep my brief opening remarks short, but nevertheless, I would like to take one brief minute to introduce the Hans Seidel Foundation to those of you who have not worked with us before or who have not heard of us before. The Hans Seidel Foundation is a German political foundation, and we are affiliated to the Christian Social Union, that is a political party in Germany. We have a mandate from the German Bundestag, that's the federal parliament, and we are in that way largely independent of government-to-government bilateral international cooperation. Our activities, we are active around the world in over 60 countries, and our activities aim at an approach of sustainable development that is based on the core principles of subsidiarity and inclusive and democratic decision-making processes. In Vietnam, as I am the resident representative of Hans Seidel Foundation in Vietnam, we focus our work on various issues, focusing on good governance approaches, environmental policy, and circular economy development. As part of our engagement in Vietnam, we also have a regional project that is ASEAN-wide, and there we focus specifically on the implementation of the SDG 12, Sustainable Consumption and Production. While we are focusing in that regional approach a lot on sustainable business startups and promoting and enhancing the capacity of sustainable impact startups, we obviously also focus on the wider regulatory framework that is necessary to implement the circular economy in Vietnam and ASEAN. And this event today is part of that regional project. So once again, I promised I will keep my remarks short, so I will end here. I'm looking forward to inspiring discussions. Thank you again, and yeah, enjoy the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and everybody present here. And thank you to the Hans Seidel Foundation. It wouldn't have been possible to be here without them. So today we will be listening from leading experts and policymakers on their international experiences and best practices in building circular economy roadmaps. And after that, DG Tho will give a brief overview of what is going on in the Vietnam Circular Economy National Action Plan. And we will explore what constitutes a robust roadmap and how it can be tailored specifically to emerging economies. We will first start with a keynote speech and presentation by Mr. Kari Herlevy, Project Director for Global Collaboration and Sustainability Solutions at Citra, who will share Finland's experience and best practice in developing its own roadmap. After that, I'll present Circular Innovation Lab's research work on international best practices, trends, and innovation in national circular economy roadmaps. And after the presentation, we will hear from Dr. Tho, Director General for the Institute of Strategy and Policy on Natural Resources and Environment, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Vietnam. We will talk about Vietnam's transition toward the circular economy, outlining Vietnam's experience and progress in developing its circular economy national action plan. Thereafter, we will have a short panel discussion. And after the panel discussion, we will open the floor for discussion to the audience. And we will also invite attendees joining online to share their questions online, and we'll pick them up during the Q&A. I want to thank Espondre for supporting and co-hosting this session, and to Dr. Patrick Schorer from Chatham House as our knowledge partner, and Citra for enabling this World Circular Economy Forum Accelerator Session. And last but not the least, I want to thank the entire team at Circular Innovation Lab who could not be there in Helsinki with us, but are the backbone of Circular Innovation Lab. And over to you, Kari. I'll just put the presentation. Okay.
Thank you very much for the kind words. It's great to be here, and hopefully have joined the forum and the content, and especially network. I heard there have been hundreds of bilateral meetings during the forum, so it's certainly a place to network. I'll tell just briefly about our experience of circular economy roadmaps from the Finnish perspective, and if I start from, maybe it's not changing, but if I go from here. So I have been in charge of the process phases from 2015 to 2019 when we updated the roadmap. The first one was established 2016, and at the time it was internationally first national roadmap. But I would have to stress that this is a process, so there is not single roadmap. It is really how to take forward in a national level such a big theme as circular economy, and what kind of measures do you have. But certainly from our point of view, first thing was to have the mapping of the economic potential of circular economy. That we did before the roadmap itself, to lay the ground that this is not only environmental, but it's economic opportunity as well. And at the moment, government has a principal decision to move Finland towards circular economy by 2035. So as you can see, it is really a process of different phases. We have made a guidebook how to make a national roadmap, and this is from the guidebook itself. You could say also a boring process description, but it has quite important messages. And at the moment, we are looking also internationally what is happening. I would put the emphasis in 8 and 9, execution and evaluation, and that's not really happening enough at the moment. There are already roadmaps, not of course enough, but certainly the execution part has been lacking power. And that's of course case of many different reasons, but certainly one of them is that it is not maybe possible to take these kind of initiatives forward in a broader sense in a national level if there is not a very wide political commitment to the process itself. The Finnish case, of course, includes a lot of different angles here. It's not only about what's happening in Finland, it's more also how we contribute internationally. And WCEF is one, but then of course there's export opportunity, etc. But certainly we have to make sure that the Finnish content and the work that we do is also very important. We have focused a lot in education and the competence building, and that has been very important part of the work, that we have competencies in all education sector, but also in the working life as well. That's of course not the only thing. But there has been just recently an evaluation of the latest plan and what is needed there. And I just mentioned that there has to be a consistent part of decision-making, part of the process, and not just projects and programs, but really have a strong holistic view on what to do, and really important political decisions in place as well. So I would suggest to focus on those aspects early on already, that the groundwork is good and it's ample ground to go forward. But of course, you have to have solutions and different kind of economic instruments in place as well. Also, some other points from the evaluation is that, of course, this is a play between or actually co-creation process with public and private sector. So this should work together. And I think we saw yesterday, especially that the financing sector internationally is now putting a lot of emphasis in this, and that hasn't happened before. In international level, and I would say in the national level, that is a similar challenge as well. So that's something that is changing at the moment. The consumer side is also a challenge. We have worked a lot with citizen engagement and nudging, and we have, in fact, Markus Terho, can you raise your hand here over there, who is a specialist in this area and can also give guidance how to move forward. Of course, online persons don't see, but Markus Terho from Sitra is the right person to talk to. But anyway, I can't emphasize as a kind of final comments that this is about communication a lot. So how to motivate different peoples in different levels, how to provide education and training to move things forward. So in that sense, it's a quite a complex process, but it's doable. But you need to have a very strong organizations to push it forward. As Sitra, as a closing remark, we are independent funding agency or foundation who actually work very much under the Finnish Parliament's guidance and can push things forward in an independent fashion in Finland. And that's one of the key things to consider, that you have that kind of players that are trusted in the society and can take things forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kari, for giving such a valuable presentation, and we all are very inspired by Finland's achievements in circular economy. We've made a short presentation on international best practices in developing circular economy roadmaps, which we have worked over the past few months. We've analyzed 9 different circular economy roadmaps of different countries. Looking at the trajectory, the first, it wasn't called a roadmap then, but was called Basic Act for Establishing a Sound Material Cycle Society in Japan in 2000. And at that time, circular economy was not even a word. And Japanese were really the front runners in thinking about this idea as a part of the society and part of the community. So they ensured that community was involved and society was involved in making the change in the Japanese society. So it started in 2000, and afterwards they took around 2 to 2.5, 3 years to develop the first roadmap. What they did, something really exciting, was they knew that governments change. So they ensured that they have a scheduled review of progress embedded in the act itself. So even if the governments changed, then by law, every government had to report scheduled review of ongoing developments in circular economy. So this ensured kind of that this continues and could not be stopped by future successive governments. The other interesting thing they did was ensuring that decentralization happened. So they knew that having a central law does not really help municipalities and local governments and communities. So they made a set of local laws that could be and so that the municipalities and cities could be empowered to take decisions and ensure a sound material cycle society is established. So they implemented a lot of, they gave a lot of trust on the people and local context to make this happen. Then looking at Sitra, they started their circular economy roadmap in 2015 with a working group of 50 members, where they first did an analysis on situational picture, like Kari had already mentioned, to do a detailed state of play and how the Finnish economy looked at that point of time. And the key in 2015 was to make Finland a circular economy champion by 2025. And we're kind of seeing that happening. The focus areas they chose were food systems, forest, technical loops, transport, and logistics. And again, in the finished roadmap, the interesting idea was that they ensured that a regular review happened to ascertain the progress. So there was a review that happened in 2018, and then an updated roadmap was published in 2019 as per that. Just the numbers, there were around 1,000 plus stakeholder participants that attended a lot of events, 350 comments, and 40 million euro of funding that Finnish government gave for developing its circular economy roadmap. This is an infographic that actually prepared by Chatham House, where we can see how many global roadmaps are in development at the moment. So there are at the moment around 50 in development, and you can see the yellow color where they are committed to in progress, and in the green, they've already launched their national circular economy roadmap progress. This was also presented in Kigali when we did the global roadmap initiative. Let's look at the timeline. So starting with Japan again, and then 2015 is Finland, and then EU publishes the Circular Economy Action Plan. So you see there's a big gap of 12 years that nothing really happened on circular economy during that time. But since then, since 2015, then it was the Netherlands that came up, and then Portugal, and 2018 again France with its revolutionary circular economy laws. They've actually been also be spearheaders in terms of reduction of food waste and ensuring that the loops are closed. In fact, France is also coming up heavily on textiles and circular economy, one of the first front runners in the EU to do that. After that, it was Slovenia, Taiwan, Greece, and Denmark in 2018. Then Colombia in 2019. Then you see in 2020, there is a big wave of circular economy roadmaps, both from the global north and global south, a lot from global north, but Peru did it. Spain, UK, Philippines is working on it. They did have a national action plan on sustainable consumption and production, but now they're actually also working on a circular economy roadmap. China in 2021. So China is also a very interesting case. In 2008, after Japan, they were the first country to come up with the circular economy law. It's called Circular Economy Promotion Law, 2008. But they really never had and that was actually a lot focused on agriculture only. But they really never had a plan to implement a complete roadmap. But now they've done that. And in fact, now they're also doing a lot of work on bioeconomy, which is kind of spearheading ahead of circular economy as well. Then another interesting country is Rwanda that launched its circular economy roadmap in Kigali at World Circular Economy Forum 2022. So there is a lot of, looking at this, there is a lot coming in the global south also in terms of national circular economy roadmaps. And there are a lot more that are going to come in the coming months and years. So how do we tailor circular economy roadmaps to improve success? It's very difficult because we're so used to getting money from the linear economic model of growth. So countries always look at how at least at the start, to minimize the risk of that transition from linear to circular economy. So ensuring that key industries and exports are protected. So that's difficult, but that's also important. So how can that be done? It's not easy. So that's where innovation comes in, investment comes in, efficiencies and economies of scale in circular economy comes in, because otherwise we'll not be able to protect and circular economy is so unique. Circular economy negates the idea of economy versus environment. It ensures that economy and environment both are in hand with each other, and actually not just hand in hand. They raise prosperity. That's the goal of circular economy in reality. And after we utilize these innovation and investment opportunities, the key is to reduce the barriers to change. And we have a lot of them. The way we account our success, the way we calculate our success in terms of economy, not looking at natural capital in our GDP calculation. So we need to reduce regulatory weaknesses. We need to change our policies. I always say that instead of coming up with new circular economy laws, we need to reduce the laws that inhibit circular economy. That is more important to do that. Technological constraints that are there, and also political environment that needs to be looked at. And then we also, another focus which is very important, is to learn from other countries that have developed their circular economy roadmaps, not to reinvent the wheel, to understand how they have done it, and most importantly, believing that this cannot be achieved without collaboration. Linear economy is a problem which is not one country per se, and we are all interconnected, and COVID has taught us that. So we have to ensure that it is a collaborative effort. Then only circular economy roadmaps can be successful and can be attuned to each other to ensure that there is progress beyond borders. So we kind of looked at which are the main industries these 9 circular economy roadmaps focused on. So Japan, right at the start, only at that time focused on waste management. France, Italy, Spain, and Sweden focus a lot on textiles, plastics, waste industry, food, and biomass. Although I am a firm believer that circular economy has to do a lot with systemic change, which is actually the core. But there are sectors that are actually more linear than the other, and absolutely linear than the others. So we need to have some kind of first mover change that we need to do in some sectors like that. Greece, Finland, Portugal, and Slovenia looked at construction, transport, agriculture, forestry, and biomass. And Chile looked at fishing, agriculture, mining, plastics, tourism. And there's a last list, which is very, very comprehensive, in which we looked at electronics, batteries, packaging, plastics, textiles, construction, food, biomass, water, and nutrients. If you look at it carefully, we are kind of moving towards systemic change by choosing the sectors in the trajectory, because countries have realized choosing 2-3 sectors does not really make an impact like that, because often circular economy is also about closing the loop, not just in the same sector, but also ensuring that loops go into other sectors as well, as sometimes a nutrient to the other, as sometimes a raw material to the other sector. So unless we have a comprehensive roadmap which covers the systemic change, individual sector allocation is somewhat not entirely successful. There are also few countries that have looked at value chains, specifically Denmark and Scotland. They've looked at focusing a lot on business incubators and innovation in their roadmap, circular design, construction, infrastructure, and waste. And often there are other sectors that have been added, are energy, education, and tourism as well. Mostly so for countries that are heavily dependent on tourism. When we look at the indicators and metrics that have been used in these roadmaps, it's a very interesting. When we researched about it, it's a very interesting data that came out. If you look at recycling rate, it came out in 11 places, and resource productivity, total waste production, at 10. I do not see much upstream indicators being present in everywhere. We're still, while we're talking about circular economy roadmaps, we're still, our main focus, our main indicator is still recycling rate. How is that efficient? I don't know, because recycling rate can increase, but population is also increasing. Our consumption is also increasing. So recycling rate probably is not the only or the major tool for measuring circularity. There is a bit on circularity rate. There are three roadmaps that have indicators on circularity rate, but then again focused only on renewable energy. There is a little bit on resource consumption, but I don't see much on upstream innovation, upstream design, reduction in design, and that's also difficult to measure. Upstream innovation is also difficult to measure, but circular economy is about upstream changes. It's about not having waste at the outset, and this is about, and these indicators look like having waste, but probably processing waste better. So this is something that we need to probably look at when we are developing circular economy roadmaps now and the future. We again kind of looked at what are there defined goals in circular economy roadmaps with every let's say annual intervals. We saw Denmark, France, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, and Serbia had very loosely quantified goals. Austria, China, and the second list had identified good metrics and with good goals. But there are some which had really robust monitoring systems, regular monitoring systems. So you see there is a big gambit of how circular economy roadmaps are created with different issues behind it. So we have to learn from this and probably try to be on the other side as much as possible in our development of roadmaps. Again, we looked at the breadth of indicators in circular economy roadmaps. These are underdefined. Then these are the countries that have established good level of indicators, and then there are detailed indicators and then there are comprehensive indicators. So it is also very important to see that as we are moving forward, like in the trajectory of timeline, we are seeing countries have realized that, because this is something very new. I think we are all learning how to develop circular economy roadmaps, but as the countries are moving forward, they are developing comprehensive indicators and metrics, because they've realized that if we can't measure it, we can't review it, we can't change it. So this is the kind of how indicators and metrics look in different roadmaps. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Director General Thor to give his presentation on international best practices on Vietnam's experience in circular economy roadmaps. I'll just put your presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to share Vietnam experience with all of you. This is my third presentation during this circular economy forum, and it's a very honor of me. And in Vietnam, we have the opportunity to develop the circular economy since the 2020, because Vietnam strong commitment in the protecting the environment and fight against the climate change. Since the early 1990s, our legislation started to increase the enforcement of some of the principles in environment protection and climate change, as well as protecting the biodiversity. And after the Paris Agreement, we started working on the circular economy. And in 2020, circular economy is integrated into the law on environment protection. And this is very important for us to move forward with the circular economy, because it's now required by law, not recommendation, not suggestion, but that's what the central government, local government, and enterprise have to do to implement the law. And because Vietnam is a very small economy, but large in population, we economic growth over the past 35 years have the negative impact on the environment. And we can now feel the impact of the environment pollution, and as well as the climate change that increase the temperature, increase the flood, and shortage of water and a lot of problem in Vietnam. And that's why in the law on environmental protection in 2020, we consider circular economy as one of the way we can fight against the three crises that the world is facing now. The first one is on the environmental pollution. The second one is on climate change. And we have committed with net zero by 2050. And the third one is to restoration and regeneration of biodiversity loss. And throughout our law, we have a lot of the regulations that follow the circular economy principle. We identify in the law that we have 4 criteria for circular economy. The first one is that efficient resource use, to focus on to reduce the use of material, especially the fossil fuel. And the second criteria is to prolong the life of product and material. And the third criteria is to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide and also the reducing the waste. And the last one is not to have a negative impact on the environment. And we try to make everything simple and everything that is implementable, and try to make everything very clear, transparent from top down, from the central government to the local government, and as well as requiring the enterprise to implement circular economy. In our law, we require that all the central government strategy, policy, and plan, as well as a provincial strategy, policy, and plan, must integrate the circular economy into their implementation and policy. And we have 3 national level plans, that is the land use plan, the master plan, and the marine use plan. And 63 provinces in Vietnam all have a provincial plan for their own development, focusing on inclusive, sustainable, and economic development. From the enterprise side, we focus on the sustainable consumption and production value chains. And we require enterprise also integrate the circular economy into their policy and plan as the old supply chains. And the requirement can be implemented by either incentive or punishment. In our law, we have the incentive like green procurement, green bond, green credit, green labeling, and we also have the requirement for firm to do extended producer responsibility, and to require firm and community to do source segregation of waste as source. So all that regulation is defined in our law that require the firm to implement circular economy into their production, and also for the community in consumption. And from the law on environmental protection 2020, we also have the government decree number 8 and the circular number 2, and we are now designing our national action plan on circular economy. So the system of regulation from top, from the law down to the national action plan, will provide the framework for all provincial master plan and regulation, and as well as provide guidance for enterprise to implement the law on environmental protection. As I mentioned, we have both incentive and also punishment for firm, and we integrate some of the principle, for example, polluter pay, or payment of ecosystem service, or extended producer responsibility, and we try to go through all the waste stream that's the including the plastic, metal, grass, oil, wood, paper, and other biomass waste stream. And go through the waste stream, we try to guide the local government and enterprise to go through from exploiting, to processing, manufacturing, delivery, consuming, and collection of waste, segregation of waste as source, and transportation of waste, storage of waste, and even remaining waste for use as a material. We can have some application to encourage firms to reuse and to recycle the product and material. And if they do not do the recycling, they have to pay in this extended producer responsibility scheme. So the way this our law is designed in the way that encourages the whole society, from the central government to provincial government and to enterprise, they have to do reduce, reuse, and recycle. And the second pillar in our circular economy is that we focus on the product. In the products, we focus on packaging, especially food and beverage, and also packaging in agriculture, and also for pesticide and fertilizer. And also we focus on other products, especially e-waste, as our priority. And we also focus on the area that we have a competitive edge with other countries. For example, textile. Now the European and American consumer focus very much on green transformation. Even they put green transformation before good quality and the price of the goods. So the area of textile shoes maker have a very much depend on the process that we can do the green transformation in Vietnam in order to compete with other countries in the region. For example, Bangladesh, they go very fast forward with the support from USA to transform their textile industry to greener and transform it into the circular economy application. And also the other area, for example, steel and cement can also work together to help with the application of best practice in the circular economy. The third pillar that we do in the circular economy is for industry. For industry, we focus on energy, we focus on agriculture, we focus on industrial process, we focus on construction and mining, we focus on waste treatment, and on land use chain and forestry. And for energy, we are now placed as a priority because Vietnam is estimated to have a 512 gigawatt in offshore wind energy. Currently, we spend only 76 gigawatt for the whole nation. So our capacity of offshore wind energy is about 7 times of the country use at the moment. That provide opportunity for Vietnam to develop the offshore wind energy, not just for domestic use, but also to export to other nations. And in terms of offshore wind energy, we receive a lot of support from G7 country and also European country in terms of helping us with the development of offshore wind technology, transmission technology, and storage technology, and using green hydrogen and also ammonia is very important for storing the energy for exporting in the future. And we estimate that for the green transformation, we need about 350 billion to 400 billion US dollar. And thanks to our Just Energy Transition Partnership signed with the G7 country and European country last December, we are the third country in the world to have the agreement with the G7 and European country after South Africa and Indonesia. And we get 15.5 billion US dollar, and according to the South Africa experience, we may be able to mobilize about 200 billion in the green capital for the development of the green transformation and circular economy. And that's what we expected to do in the next few years. In terms of circular economy, we try to incorporate all the stakeholders within the society to implement it. It required by law, and also to raise awareness and education for the population so that they can know how they can apply the circular economy best practice in their ordinary life. For example, for the central government and local government, as I said, they must integrate circular economy into their strategy, policy, and plan. For enterprise, they must integrate circular economy into their supply chain. And for the public and community, we do in our law, we require that circular economy and green transformation must be integrated into the program from the kindergarten to primary school, to secondary school, to high school, and to higher education. So the education sector must also introduce and guide citizens how to cope and how to fight against climate change in the future, and protecting the environment and restoration and regeneration of biodiversity loss. That is the way we do it in Vietnam, and we try to get involved all of the stakeholders into the implementation. And we can now achieve that because we receive the strong determination of domestically, because the government commitment, local government commitment, and the general public and media have done a lot of work to raise awareness. And we also receive the international support because Vietnam is among very few countries that have a commitment at the COP26 to achieve net zero by 2050. And we also target to fight against the environmental pollution by achieving zero waste in 2050. And we also work to achieve the restoration and regeneration of biodiversity loss by increasing the area of protection and conservation, and also using the environmental friendly technique for development of economy, and try to have an inclusive impact for the whole nation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Thaw. And I want to ask you to have another applaud for Vietnam for their efforts in doing this ambitious transformation. Now we have a short panel discussion, and I want to invite our amazing panelists, starting with Apurva Arya, CEO at Circular Innovation Lab, please. Dr. Patrick Schroeder, Senior Research Fellow in the Environment and Society Program at Chatham House. Dr. Tho, Director General at Respondre. And Dr. Quang, Director at Institute for Circular Economy Development, Vietnam National University. Thank you to all the panelists for taking out the time and coming here. Apurva, starting with you. We have a question. What makes a robust roadmap? Tell us.
Thank you, Arpit, for the lovely and wonderful question. Just for everyone present here today, I'm Apurva Arya, and I'm the founder and CEO of Circular Innovation Lab, and we're primarily working with national governments, businesses, and UN agencies to drive the transition towards a circular economy. And before I answer the question, let me just give a brief personal background as well. I'm from India, but currently working in Denmark. And so some of the thoughts and views would, of course, also come from there, I imagine. So I think first things first, Arpit, for your question, what incorporates a robust roadmap? I think inclusivity, I cannot emphasize enough on inclusivity. So on different stakeholders, right at the beginning of the process, we need to ensure that across, stakeholders from ministries, Ministry of Environment, Economics, and so on, they're all involved right at the very beginning. I think that part is super important. Arpit just mentioned about how when FITRA did that circular economy roadmap, they involved over 1,000 stakeholders from academia, civil society, policymakers, businesses, and institutions. And I think that's really important. And at the time we worked with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Arpit and I did a circular economy report in India, wherein we also followed a similar path, because of course we come from a school of thought of FITRA as well. We actually went out and met different ministries, from Ministry of Agriculture, so that's big in the global south, to Ministry of Environment, to businesses, academia, civil society. And it was an eye-opening process. It was definitely an eye-opening process. And I think the other thing when we're formulating a circular economy roadmap is to have, specific targets. So when I mean specific targets, it would mean, all-encompassing targets that are mutually exclusive and collaboratively combined. So no market goal is targeted without achieving the overall goal of circularity. For example, when you're targeting circularity of reducing consumption and making sure that materials are looped back into the system, we're incorporating all these things in this target. And once, of course, I mentioned targets, monitoring is super important. Metrics, monitoring, if we are going for a specific goal, whether it's the targets that Arpit was mentioning with the indicators, we need to be able to monitor them and follow the progress of these indicators and metrics that we put through. Now, I think the other thing that I would like to touch upon right after this is scheduled review. I think Arpit also mentioned this before, and that is super important as part of this process. A global roadmap is a really expensive process. Also what Dr. Thor just presented, it takes years and years. It's a 3 to 5 year process of doing such an exercise wherein you try to get all stakeholders from different ministries with their specific mandates, making sure that you're, getting businesses involved as well, and you're doing what is good for the society, for the country, and that really requires everyone being involved. And I think once we talk about scheduled reviews, I think the final thing is combining this with legislation. I think that is really important. What Kari also mentioned before was to make sure that the nodal ministry or the nodal organization that is involved in putting forth the circular economy roadmap can carry it on its shoulder. And that also gets the process faster. Legislation does that. And we saw that in Japan's example, when Arpit mentioned the fundamental plan for a material cycle society, it really was a starting point of having legislation on food waste recycling, on construction waste recycling, and so on. So I think that really has that effect that we want on giving us that the throughput and the follow through that we want a roadmap to have. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Dr. Shodha. We've seen it, and you've studied so many circular economy roadmaps, and we have also seen today so many. All of them have their own metrics, own standards. Everybody is trying to. Obviously, we have to have local context and local settings we've done, but still on the methodological way also, they're all sprouting up with different ideas, which is good. We are evolving. As we see also in the trajectory, the indicators increase over a period of time, and now they're getting more comprehensive. But then how do we measure global progress in circular economy with all these roadmaps having different ideas and different metrics, what do you think lies ahead?
Yes, yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, the research that you've done is actually quite useful to see how actually the metrics and indicators become more comprehensive as the countries, let's say, progress on their circular journey. So I think when you said it's more than waste and recycling, I think these are probably still really important indicators that we need, especially then also to aggregate that on global level. And so also I think these are good indicators to start for countries that embarking on that journey. How this all aggregates in the global context, I think there's something to look at what type of global process currently exists in terms of trying to harmonize standards and metrics. ISO, for example, we all know about the ISO process. I think that's a very important one. And it has these the different working groups. These 323, working with one on the definition, but then working with 3 is on how to measure progress. But that's mainly not for organizations, not necessarily on country level. So these will be important, for example, as I saw in your slides, when it comes to setting specific indicators for industries. Working with 5 is specifically about product circularity. That's then even more detailed. So yeah, what it doesn't do is obviously to have these metrics for national levels. I'm not sure there currently is such progress. But then I think it makes sense to look at all the indicators that we have currently in the SDG program framework. So I think that's what we have at the moment, the most comprehensive global type of metrics, collection targets as a dashboard. So that's what currently my thinking also goes towards how do we bring all these circularity developments more into that framework. So yeah.
And what do you think about the global roadmap initiative which Chatham House is leading? And how can that kind of collaborate these efforts and make it less complex to have different countries having different roadmaps?
Yeah, so well, as you know, it's still evolving, and the latest stage of play with the global roadmap idea is to connect that to the One Plan network and the global dialogues on sustainable consumption production. And as we discussed earlier during this week, there will be specific topics or pathways that need to be identified. And the one on metrics, for example, would be one of those. So but that's work in progress. So I hope this will take place, and it can make a good contribution. That will then also assist individual governments and countries on national level with their roadmaps.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick.
Apologies, can you speak a bit louder? We have had some complaints from our online participants that they can't hear. So because the microphone is there, just a little bit more volume up.
That's still well said.
Yes.
Dr. Thau, I was really when you gave that presentation, I was really impressed to see and really happy to see circular design being at such a forefront in your national action plan. Give us, because I'm sure this is a very busy time for you, as you have to complete the national action plan by the end of this year and has to be approved by the Prime Minister. What are the key challenges? What are the 3 key challenges you're facing at this time? in developing the roadmap. And so that the other countries that are here can learn from it and probably not do the same. Please share your vision on that.
Okay, as I mentioned in my presentation, because when we do the roadmap, we know that we are a small scale economy with a large population. We have a lot of pressure on environmental pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss. So we try to make everything that's very simple from the beginning. And for example, for the goal, we focus on zero waste for environment, zero emission for climate change, and restoration for biodiversity loss, and cascading down to industry level, product level, and from the central government to local government, and from public sector to private sector. And the second challenges as we consider is the accounting, auditing of the natural capital or material for monitoring and evaluation of the indicator of circular economy. And as you have seen that the more complex you can design the system, the more expensive for data collection and analysis. So what I want to do is all the nation, regional and global level, we can work together to have the standardization and harmonization of data so that we will not waste the resources that we collect data today, not to be able to compare with other nations in the future. So if we can work together on the coordination efforts, we can do it at the national level, regional level, and global level. In Vietnam, we try to put it into the law on statistics. Once we put it into the law, we will have a resource for data collection and for evaluation and monitor. And we work on separate projects on ocean accounting, on forest, on material accounting, and now we are using the system of economic and environment accounting that is proposed by the UN, and it tried to make it into our law. And the third challenges that we have to cope with is always financing and technology, because we need to have a digital transformation for tracking the material from the beginning to the end. And also we need financing for changing of the technology. Once we have been able to designing our waste, we need the infrastructure for implementing it. And we will try to do it in the ways that we have a limited resources. We will be able to progress it slowly to achieve the final goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Yes,
Something on the metrics. So one thing I just thought about is that, so when we talk about on metrics, I think what's emerging also now is that it's not only about materials and material streams, waste streams, etc. But as we heard over the last few days, is the employment aspect of the circular economy is also becoming increasingly important, and there's also questions around what metrics do we use to identify what is circular jobs, etc. And there are some good initiatives that are starting up with ILO and some of the groups on circular economy, PACE, etc. They've started working there. So that also would ideally have some kind of standard approach that can be used across countries. These sort of metrics, again, important if we look at this wider context of also just transitions. So that's also key.
In fact, that's really true. I mean, when we look at initial discussions with a lot of emerging economies, there is a lot of fear at times that would manufacturing go out, where would our labor go, what will happen. So as we move forward, and especially with countries that have large populations, they need to ensure people get their salaries and be able to put food and everything on their plate. So that I think as we move forward in circular economy, we often see that there are so many questions that are coming up and that we never anticipated before when we started talking about circular economy. But we have to do it. We have to go as we go. Dr. Thor, one more question for you on this. I've seen in the presentation that you're involving a wide level of stakeholders. How are you ensuring in this process that the stakeholders are involved at all stages and then from all sectors of society? What are the steps Responder is taking on that? Please enlighten us a bit on that.
As I mentioned, because our opportunities that we haven't been able to put circular economy into the law. And once it put into the legislation, it's different from best practice recommendation that everyone have to implement. And we try to do is to require the local government to integrate the master plans that design at the national level. And we focus on only the land use plan, the overall economic, social, and sustainable plan, and also the marine use plan. And that the three plans that is designed in Vietnam as the overall master plans that all local government have to implement. And at enterprise level, even though we have a lot of confrontation by enterprise when we introduce the extended producer responsibility and also the payment of ecosystem service into our law. But we have to work with them and to spread it out to have the roadmap. For example, we require that from the 1st of January 2025, supermarket will not have a single-use plastic bag. And from the 1st of January 2030, we will not allow the produce and import of single-use plastic bag. So all kind of things as the negotiation between public sector and private sector. And we cannot do it in one time because the law have come into force in January 2021. But a lot of difficulty in terms of raising the cost of the enterprise. And as a result, you may have an impact, negative impact on employment, on the price level. And all that kind of thing, we have to make it in balance and harmonization between inclusivity, between economic development, and between sustainability.
And in fact, circular economy always comes up with this conundrum for all of us, because we're always attuned to economies of scale. As much as we sell, as fast as we sell, as cheap as we sell, and circular economy is really trying to disrupt it. But our accounting systems, our GDP, everything is still based on selling as fast as possible, as cheap as possible, and to as many as possible. So we kind of, that's why Dr. Thor very rightly said that we need to kind of find a balance on the next steps of circular economy to find where sustainable development and human prosperity and economic development are attuned to each other. Thank you, Dr. Thor, for that. Dr. Kwan. Dr. Kwan, you work a lot in academia. How do you think national circular economy roadmaps, when they are developed, can be adapted to local contexts? And local contexts, I mean, really decentralized local contexts, because a country like Vietnam being so diverse and there are, every region is so different from each other. How do you think that our roadmap can be flexible and can be adapted for local context for a longer period of time? Please share your vision.
Thanks, Afid. Yeah, first of all, I'm really honored to be here today at the sessions. also want to share a bit my background. I'm professional training in water management, just shifting to circular economy in the last 5 years. Yeah, so now back to the question. Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, and we have been a bit struggling with how to do this. But also want to share that I'm also a member of advisory member to the National Action Plan. And currently we also have two local government in Vietnam, especially in southern Vietnam, to develop different circular economy plans at the local levels. And yeah, and we found it's really big challenge. First from understandings the circular economy. The circular economy is quite very new in Vietnam. So we never have any let's say trainings in the university about this. It's quite new. So people are aware about circular economy is still very limited. So how to first help local government officials, people to aware about what is about circular economy, and then now we have to translate the action plans, or we also have the national plan into practice. This is quite very challenge. But this is not only about the challenge of understanding, but challenge also because when we are talking about circular economy, we see there are a lot of cross-sectoral linkage from energy, construction, agriculture, different things. But in Vietnam, for example, this is very sectoral administrative. So people are not really easy to talk with each others, especially to do make the plan. We have to work really a lot together, costing different sectors. So I think it is capacity, raising awareness, capacity building, and have the local government to implement, to develop the local plans is still, I think, a big challenge in Vietnam. Additionally to that, I think the resources, because when we're talking about plan, we have to talk about resources, how to implement the plan, how to integrate the plan with other 3 plans that Dr. Thor just mentioned: master plan, land use plans, and marine plan. How to integrate with different existing plans is also very challenging. And so how we can allocate resources, not only money, but also resource, humans, and even especially the institutions. We have the law, it's very good, but how to institutionalize different departments to work together. This is another, I think, resources. Yeah, so just an example, we now trying to have the local government at the provincial levels, but it seems still not easy. We try to integrate it with a social integrated master plan, but there's another chance that we can do a bit lower, not only at the district level, the city level, but we can go to the district level, where we have the let's say the powers of the city level to the lower levels. So at this level they can support. For example, we develop the circularity plan for the Gondau Iceland district. So they have we have a strong support from political leader of the province, and then it's now approved. And also they assign resources, including budget, for implementing the plans for the Iceland.
Thank you so much. And I think another important, when we face these challenges in setting up in local context is changing the mindset. That becomes really difficult. Asking a factory to produce less, that doesn't make any, because the banks would not give them loan if they produce less. Asking consumers to consume less, that would reduce the GDP. So I think the whole shift in the mindset is also something is a big challenge when we actually come down in implementation of the roadmaps. Apurva, over to you. The same question to you as well.
I'm okay.
How do you think circular economy roadmaps can be adapted well for local context?
Thank you so much, Professor Kwan, for really giving everyone an overview of, how it's possible in a local context. And I think just reiterating the point both you and Arpit were making earlier about, decentralization, how that's really key. Decentralization really puts faith in the ingenuity of individuals and communities to self-organize, rather than thinking of people as cogs in a massive machine. I mean, we had a event on the global roadmap on circular economy about inclusivity. And one of the key things that we discussed was that how we need to have, the local municipalities, communities involved in the process right at the beginning, because these are the ones that are going to be implementing this plan. And I think the vision can definitely be top down, but the action plan has to be bottom up. It has to involve everyone from local governments, municipalities, communities, right at the very beginning of when we're formulating this, to ensure that this doesn't happen. And I think the other thing that you talked about, we're all people by the end of it. And in countries, I think, especially the global south, the informal sector really needs to be considered right at the very beginning when we're putting together such a plan or a roadmap or an action plan. And apart from the informal sector, I think the small and medium enterprises, SMEs are a backbone of any country, whether the global north or the global south. So I definitely think that they really need to be considered when we are formulating such a plan as this. And I think the third thing is definitely once we, learn about the situational picture, the local context, we are really dialed down on the focus areas of what needs to be worked on. I think Vietnam really gave us a sense of, what works for them, which are the focus areas that they see that could really bring the economic gains that a country like Vietnam wants and needs, as well as ensure that we have the environmental impact, which is making sure that we're regenerating environment and biodiversity, and we don't have these leakages, especially marine litter. That's a huge issue in Southeast Asia. I think that's one of the key things that I think are really important to be considered when we're talking about adapting a national circular economy roadmap to a local context. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Patrick. Sorry.
I feel like we're playing musical chairs now.
In our discussions on the circular economy roadmaps, few governments, they often feel, and not the government of Vietnam, they're really happy about it, that circular economy is another buzzword that has come up and something else will come up. And there is so much to do on SDG commitments and climate targets and Paris and all. And they have so much reporting to do. And sometimes they feel a little burdened that circular economy may not be as fruitful for them. So how do you think we can build an evidence base on how these roadmaps can help them achieve their SDG targets beyond SDG 12? Because often when we talk about circular economy, we limit ourselves with SDG 12 and not something, not anything else. Please enlighten us a bit about that.
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's just governments that feel burdened. I think all of us feeling very burdened with the circular economy. We're all working too hard. I mean, linked to the SDGs, actually for all the accelerator sessions, I think when you click on the app, you see all the icons actually, oh, this session relates to this and this and this SDG. So it's always more than just SDG 12. So over the last few years, but initially when the SDGs were designed or all the targets put in place, this was before the circular economy was discussed on the level as it's being discussed now. So it's not really linked together. But there's been a lot of research that people have done actually identifying quite specifically which practices can contribute to which types of targets, etc. So the evidence base is there. So what I think in our work, what we've also tried to highlight, and I guess I think most governments actually understand that it can help tackle several SDGs as one. So we see in the Vietnamese action plan, so you have the triple environmental crisis, and it contributes to achieving each of these rather than have separate strategies, one for biodiversity, one for climate, and one for waste. And then again, doing circular economy in an inclusive way, it addresses many of the social dimensions of the SDGs. Then the third aspect, circular business models, we know it's often difficult to reach certain scales, but those that are established, it is a business model that works. So that's also now coming across. So I think it's a very powerful model for the second half of SDG implementation. Again, that's what we also discussed previously. I think the next step is to get this understanding not only within UNEP or UNIDO or some of the other multilateral institutions that we've seen here, World Bank, etc., working on circular economy, but at the UN level, for example, the high-level political forum that's taking place this year, and the summit, the SDG summit. I think these are good opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. And if you've not had the chance to read a paper on SDG and circular economy by Chatham House, please go and do so. It's a very amazing piece of research. And thank you, Dr. Patrick. Dr. Thorpe, very intrigued to know how in this process have you chosen the focus areas? What was the process behind it? Because we have some good emerging economy representatives here, and we would all like to learn on that process. Please.
Okay, as I mentioned, we don't see as a circular economy as a way to reduce the production or to reduce the consumption. Instead, we think that's the accumulation of material and accumulation of product. So we will be able to expand our economy, and it will be going faster than before. For the linear economy, it will go from exploitation to waste. So we will waste a lot of material. Instead, now it will stay in the economy, so we will be able to expanding the economy. That's the way we see. But the difference is it will change from the preference of the customer. In the previous decade and century, we focus on the unique differentiation of the product. Now we have to focus on standardization and harmonization of the product, so that window, door, spare part have the same from one firm to the other, so it can be replaced. And because of our limited resources, we try to focus on the area we can do it in the easy way and simple way. For the waste stream, we identify a lot of the waste stream. For example, as I mentioned, plastic, metal, and oil, battery, glass, and paper, wood, and other biomass. But we focus our action plan on just plastic. If we can do, we will do metal. But battery and oil already been collected in the good way. So we focus on plastic as our way to address the waste stream as our priority and focusing on that. In terms of product, we also focus on packaging. That will help with the reduction of plastic. We focus on food and beverage, and also packaging in agricultural sector. So the way we choose the priority to make it possible for us to implement. The second thing is the e-waste, so electric equipment and appliance will be our priority. But according to the India experience, we need large scale to be able to have the infrastructure and to be able to recycle and to reuse as product. But we will encourage firms through our extended producer responsibility in the way that Sony, Panasonic can collect the waste of Samsung and other firms. So in that way, we will encourage firms to work together. You don't need to recycle that's your product. You can recycle other competitor product and you don't have to pay for that. So that is the way we do in Vietnam, try to make it simple for firms to implement. And the third area we focus on is among energy, industrial process, agriculture, construction and mining, we focus on energy. And we see that energy is the way that we can achieve net zero. And we see our opportunity of the offshore wind energy, and we can see that we will be able to transform it. And we have a commitment to reduce our coal-fired power. So that's a strong commitment of the government. Recently, some European countries come back to have a coal-fired power, but Vietnam still insists to commit to reduce it. And in agricultural sector, we also commit to reduce the methanol. And it is very brave for Vietnam because for Vietnam, we are among the 3 largest exporters of rice. And for paddy field, it's account for 40.4% of methane emission in Vietnam. 90% of that through water, 9% through root, and that's 1% through the tree. So we had to change the way we cultivate it from wet paddy field to dry paddy field, but it will have a negative impact on the quality. So all of the area that we have the priority on, we know that we will be able to achieve the target that we have committed. It will be tough and difficult for us. We choose a simple way to implement it. Thanks.
Thank you for such a detailed. In fact, a lot of research says that circular economy transition cannot happen without understanding the nexus between energy and circular economy. It's and even water for that instance, and unless we look at it as a comprehensive transition, it's not going to happen. So thank you for enlightening us with that. Dr. Kwan, sorry about that. What do you think is the role of academia in building circular economy roadmaps, and how has the experience been in Vietnam?
Yeah, thank you. I think academia in terms of circular economy roadmap, but I think in more general for circular economy, we need to play more and more important roles. First, like I mentioned that educational program, for example, not only higher education, but even from primary school, we have to have research or even develop program for this, and then go to undergrad to graduate. And after the design circular economy program or education, I think still quite a big challenge, because it is really kind of interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and include even innovations, because we think that we know that innovation is very important to implement or developing circular business model. For example, in the past we have seen that I think in circular economy, people, academia more do a lot, especially on, for example, technology based from cleaner production and some other process maybe for improving the process. But when we talk about circular economy, especially let's come back to the national roadmap, it's about implementations, crossing different levels, local, national, international. So social study, especially on institutional aspect, is still very lacking. So research, academy from research perspective, it much further to support those things. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. That the roles it's not only about interdisciplinary, but I think again transdisciplinary, where how to train people not only in the university, but also even with professional or consultants. I think we need a lot of training to help people how to work across different disciplines, but also across different stakeholders. Many people involved, different stakeholders involved. So those things are still, I think, quite limited. Even I think in European developed program. Even I think here, we need to, because for example, when we try to learn how to develop local, how to, for example, how to mainstream circular economy in social economical development plans. I think it's very limited research about it. And for example, that is one of the report we also shared today, the support from Hansi, but we were very difficult to find out that. Okay, yeah. So again, I think academy, even the role of academy, role of the university in the coming years, especially in the kind of circular economy, green transition, isn't much more. Just another example, I think I forgot to mention that the rebound effect. We should not make a new solution by creating not only one or many problems. Yeah, inclusiveness, biodiversity, digital restoration, regeneration. I think this is very not easy. So academy need to go by together with professional, with government, with industry, try to foresee some possible impacts of this and to a better way. Thank you.
Thank you. I really like you've just given the whole gambit of starting from kindergarten, creating a circular generation, to the use of academia till innovation and entrepreneurship. And so we require academia at all stages of life to make this transition and to a just transition to a circular economy. One more question for you. Could you share, please, how the process of circular economy roadmap in ASEAN is, and how Vietnam could contribute to the development of circular economy in region?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we've been also discussed with colleagues especially in ASEAN countries. So we see the development of circular economy in Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, some others. But mostly there's still quite a bit lacking of collaborations among the countries. Yeah, so yesterday I was also attending the international the trade, circular economy trade. It's really an example how different countries can work together to develop. For example, we also discussed about, yeah, Dr. Thor also mentioned about standardizations. But like we knew, of course, we have a lot of requirements, indications, but how this impact to the livelihoods of the people. Because if you want to follow the standard, the people also, the local people, let me talk about agriculture. Farmer have to get the license or the certification. It's really challenging. So how to develop the standard for local communities, and how this can be translated, or how it to be comparable to other standards, so that the product of the local farmer can go to Europe, to some other developed market. But of course, because we don't have to make more barriers, and it's going to cost more money, of course, yeah. And the livelihood people can even not improve, even they create some good product. So that is just an example that I think that we can looking at how country can collaborate, especially regional and north-south collaborations. Another example that we are discussing, because Vietnam is in the Mekong Delta, one of the top river basin in the world. We are in the Delta, and we are affecting a lot of challenges in terms of upstream development, climate change, sea level rise, and we see there quite some opportunity. For example, in the lower Mekong region, country can collaborate, because it's not only about biodiversity conservation, but it's also about energy, economic collaborations among the country based on the perspective from circular economy. So regional collaboration is very our country cross-border collaboration. I think it could be very important for Vietnam. And again, we have national circular roadmap and we have global one, and how we can put it together. In case, yeah, I think it's quite very interesting, but I think it would be very meaningful for the country.
Thank you so much. We'll now quickly open the floor for questions. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. I have actually two questions. Doctor, what's the criteria for prioritize for businesses? Actually, after that business, you have agriculture, manufacturing, chemical. What is your criteria for prioritize? The second, as you know, reluctant people is there. What incentive you create to those people, small, medium, for implementation? You have very good policy, but they don't accept, you do nothing. Can you help us?
Okay, as I mentioned, in terms of goal and criteria, we make it very simple and clear from the top and cascade down to the industry level. And as I mentioned, we focus on zero waste, zero emission, and restoration of biodiversity. And the 4 criteria that we use is just to reduce the use of material, especially fossil fuel. And secondly, to prolong the life of the material and product. The third one is to reduce the emission of waste and carbon dioxide. The last one is not to have a negative impact on the environment. Last year, we have issued a green taxonomy. And our green taxonomy is a learning from European experience. We have a very clear indicator for each industry and each product. You can look at our green taxonomy and you can see the clear indicator and criteria that we have with that. Even though all of our indicator focusing on what I have mentioned, but it have a clear for each industry and firm can refer to that to implement. That is the way we first issue the green taxonomy and then issue the action plan for circular economy. And in implementing it, we have both the stick and carrot. That means that we have an incentive that in our law, we have a green procurement, green bond, green credit, and green labeling. And all firms are encouraged to have the green transformation and have an opportunity from the government to providing them with the access to green bond and green credit. And the international community also supports us in terms of financing, World Bank, IFC, G7, and European country, providing us with the funding to help us to implement our incentive. And also, we in our extended producer responsibility scheme, if firm can recycle, then they don't have to pay for that. And we do it in the ways as in the past. Environment, climate change, biodiversity are free. No people pay for that. That's why virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled plastic. And we have no incentive for firm to use recycled plastic instead of buying virgin plastic. And now we try to put everything into the cost so that is the inclusive, just, and fair to the firm. If you we have a payment of ecosystem service. We have an extended producer responsibility and all kind of the things that if firm implement our law, they will be better. And if they do not implement our law, they will be get out of business. And that's why when we introduce extended producer responsibility, even though European country and American, it carries us to do it. But the AmCham and the EuroCham can fund us because they said Singapore and Malaysia hasn't implemented it, while Vietnam implemented it. And that's the way we have to negotiate between public sector and private sector to have the common roadmap so that we spread it out until 2030 for them to have a time to prepare. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a fantastic discussion. You were talking upon SMEs, I think Arvid, Apurva, and some others also. You know, 90% of employees in Denmark, for instance, where I come from, are employed by SMEs. So this, when we talk about labor and workplaces, SMEs are really at the key of this. So please, a question for you from Vietnam. Do you put any tools in place to help SMEs cope with your new legislation?
In fact, we have the roadmap, and we understand the stakeholder interest. We have the fund from WCEF fund that help us with the helping the small and medium enterprise innovation and entrepreneurship to cope with the circular economy requirement and green transformation requirement. And in our law, we have a roadmap. For example, we now require only the firm that emit more than 3,000 tons of carbon dioxide to implement the requirement of the government to reduce it and not to go beyond. And they will have the emission quota. And if you go beyond the emission quota, they will have to buy for carbon credit. That's what we require until 2030. And we require until 2050, firm that's the emit more than 1,500 tons of carbon dioxide will have a quota, and they have to buy carbon credit to compensate for that. And so small and medium enterprise that emit less than that will not be effective until 2050. So we try to work on the 2080 principle that focus on the large firm that emits a lot, rather than on the small and medium enterprise, 80% of them thus emit not enough. And for the restoration of forest, for increased area of forest, we will be able to compensate for the small and medium enterprise emission. That's what we do.
Just to this, I think this is very interesting question, because in Vietnam we have, I think, 97% of the community is SME and micro SMEs in Vietnam. And we have been observing, we have also some study about the current awareness and also capacity about green transition in SME in Vietnam. And actually it's quite a bit worrying area, because the current survey so is very low knowledge on capacity to have that. So I think apart from the policy level that Nicola mentioned, I think we have to work a lot to support the MEs, especially on capacity buildings. And last year we also have a training program supported by UNDP to train SME, but I think still very little. But we need to do a lot on that. But this, I think, when we talk about their capacity or their readiness, they're still very low. But it seems there are quite a lot of potential for SME to develop their business linked to in terms of circular economy, and also in the combination with the digitalization. So we need to connect SME together, and also we are now trying to looking at how the roles of FDI companies or also a state-owned company who's leading the value chains, and we have 100,000 companies is going to the value chain to have the SME for the transitions. Yeah, so this would be very important.
I just quickly wanted to add to this discussion on SMEs. I think one of the key things that I've noticed, like a lot of policies and especially tax reforms that are trying to incentivize SMEs to move towards a more circular business model. I think one of the major challenges that we're facing right now is anything that is to do with redesign or really redesigning the products and systems that the SMEs have. And this is where they really need to de-risk, because it takes a huge amount of investment to make these changes. And I think some of the policies that really target this upstream level could really help SMEs. Right now, we have a lot of policies, for instance, that would, if you are, extending life from a repair refurbishment perspective, you will get less value-added tax. There are some in Sweden, for instance, you have, and this is involving extended producer responsibility with consumers. And I think that's also one key on how to make sure that, EPR is a really good, policy instrument to have. So in Sweden, for instance, any consumers with a large household appliances, if they go and repair it, the company gets, 50% tax deductible on their labor tax. So that's also some ways that, we're trying to, aim at policies that are extending the use and, repairability of products and services. But we don't see a lot of, policies that are coming upstream right at the design phase of when we're trying to redesign products and systems. And I think that would be super valuable for SMEs especially.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So over to you.
Thank you for a very inspiring discussion, first of all. Then at some point you mentioned that there has been some inspiration from the EU taxonomy from other regions, and this is very much welcome. At the same time, we're aware that similar initiatives are happening also in the ASEAN region. Just to mention the energy transition mechanism, the Asian Development Fund, have also been inspiring and developed, and we know how what are the
Yes, as I mentioned, we have the support from GIZ and also World Bank and IFC when we are designing our green taxonomy. And most of our industry and product we learn from the experience from the European green taxonomy. However, we have in Vietnam, when we design the regulation, we have to take the comment and recommendation from our provincial level, and we also have to make survey with enterprise and community in general. So everything we design in our green taxonomy is localized and is according to Vietnam context. After we submit it to the Prime Minister for signing it. And as I mentioned, in the implementation, we consider about the capability of the firm, especially the small and medium enterprise. And we try to have the leading firms as the last firm that will lead other firm. And we have the experience, for example, for the sugar manufacturing. When they come to Vietnam, they can have all the pattern who plant the sugar cane, and they provide seed and they provide technologies, so the product can be standardized for them to collect and to produce sugar. So in that way, we also need lead manufacturer that will doing the designing our waste for all of the product in Vietnam. And thanks to the support of Standard Chartered Bank, SFBC, World Bank, IFC, and Asian Development Bank, we now try to have a coordinated efforts to help the firm to move forward with our green transition and transformation roadmap. Thanks.
I just want to add to this. So we are supporting the Board of Investments in Philippines on developing an evaluation tool that specifically gives them incentives under their strategic investment priority plan. So the parameters are around economic, social, and environmental indicators. And based on this evaluation, specific industries or projects that would apply through these kind of systems would get these specific tax incentives. And it could be, and it's something that's like you would get a tax incentive right in the first year, or it's a plan over a 5-year period. So there are different mechanisms that work with this, but this is also something that we're doing in the ASEAN region. That is.
Thank you, Purva. Any more questions?
That's a question for you. Actually, one of the challenge today among the legal bodies of the company, the best performance indicators. And because very difficult to benchmark yourself with others. Everybody using different benchmarking KPI. From your experience, and I have seen you review a lot of. What is the appropriate? I'm not saying the best or the appropriate one, at least can measure your performance or effectiveness of your implementation.
I think what we need to do is we need to, and we're still all learning on this, we need to have some kind of a global framework for indicators, something flexible, something that can be adapted to local context. Otherwise, if we all come up with our own, it's not going to be, and become too strict, have a global indicator system, then it's not adapted to local context. So some kind of framework or guidelines to develop these indicators at a global level, which the Global Roadmap Initiative will try to do. And then it should come down to all the countries doing their own, like they've done with SDGs, and every country have chosen their own indicators afterwards of what they want to target on, what they want to focus on. So have something centralized, but then have something have decentralized for the countries to choose and move forward, which is key because we need a global transition, not a country transition to circular economy. I have last question for all the panelists, starting with Dr. Schroeder. It's just one line answers question. What is, in your mind, one key ingredient for national circular economy roadmaps to be a success? And all of you, please give short answers on that.
I think, yeah, I think political commitment to it. I think that's the key ingredient. So comes from the top level, prime ministers and or governments are committed to doing that. I think then a lot of other things fall into place, including the more technical aspects around indicators, and financial incentives, all of that. So I think that's for me the main one.
Dr. Thom?
Yeah, as I have mentioned, the key for the implementation is the domestic political support, international support, and also we have a clear accounting, auditing, monitoring, and evaluating to provide firm with incentive and as well as a punishment in the process of implementing the circular economy.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, I come back also to my previous talk about the capacity and also the sharing across different sectors. So I hope the National Action Plan will be widely consulted across different sectors, different ministry, different stakeholders, but also different levels, especially at the local provinces, province cities. Yeah.
I think for me, it's two things. First of all, definitely inclusivity, involving all stakeholders and making sure that it's whether it's national or global. I think we need to have everyone. And I think the other thing is cooperation. I think that's really key. We just saw like there are so many national circular economy roadmaps out in the world. One started way back in 2015, and now we're having, so there's so much to learn out there from different roadmaps and what worked, what didn't. And especially from a North-South perspective, I think North-South cooperation is key here. So for me, that would be that.
Thank you, Purva. And I was just, remember, just I think a couple of months ago, I was discussing with a Latin American country on their circular economy roadmap, and they already do. And they are now confused how to implement it. So they don't have an implementation plan. So we must remember today, as I think all of us, that a roadmap is a start and not the destination. And we need to have an implementation plan to implement it. I want to thank our amazing panelists today and the audience for being here. And we have Michael in the closing remarks, please.
I think I will do that without the microphone, as Apurva already showed that it's not necessary that much. I'll keep it short. Thank you very much for this, I would say, I would very much say inspiring panel. I think this, we learned a lot of opportunities how to learn from each other in the future. And I'm very happy to say that we can also, from Hans Seidel Foundation, we will continue the work with Espondre, with Vietnam. And actually, this is also something that I would like to stress in this regard, dimension. We talked a lot about inclusivity today and multi-stakeholder involvement. So the next consultation workshop that we will also be working on with Espondre together for the National Action Plan on Circular Economy. The date is set. It's on 22nd June in Ho Chi Minh City. So this process of involving stakeholders in this ongoing process is continuing, and we are happy to be part of that and work with you, Digital and Espondre further. I would say that is about it. We have coffee and some cakes outside, so please feel free to stick around, continue the discussion in a more informal way. And of course, one more thanks to Circular Innovation Lab also for putting that all together. You have amazing energy and commitment, and I really look forward to continue the work with you guys. So thank you very much. Thank you.